Marcus Reeves had been driving for over 4 hours on the dirt road that cut through the Montana mountains, his fingers tight on the wheel of his aging Ford pickup. The October sun was beginning to set behind the snow-capped peaks, casting everything in gold and orange hues. In the back seat, Ghost lifted her head, her pointed ears on alert. The Wolf hybrid knew when they were getting somewhere important. Marcus glanced in the rearview mirror and met the animal's amber eyes. "We're almost there, girl," he said, his voice hoarse from hours of not speaking. It had been 15 years since the last time Marcus had driven this road. 15 years since he had sworn never to return to Camp Pine Ridge. But something inside him had shifted in recent months. Maybe it was age creeping up on him. He was 42 now. Maybe it was the loneliness that was starting to weigh too heavily. Or maybe it was simply time to face the ghosts he'd left behind in these mountains. The wooden sign appeared at the bend, half fallen and covered in moss. Pine Ridge Scout Camp, founded in 1967. Marcus slowed down and turned left, onto the path that led to the camp. The trees closed in over the road like a dark green tunnel. He remembered when this path was well maintained, with trimmed edges and signs every 50 yards. Now nature had reclaimed what was hers. Branches scraped against the sides of the pickup. Roots broke through the crumbling asphalt. When he finally reached the clearing where the camp stood, Marcus shut off the engine and sat for a moment, just looking. The 6 wooden cabins were still standing, but they were covered in moss with some loose boards. The flagpole was crooked, bearing no flag. The mess hall had broken windows. The lake in the background was covered with a layer of leaves and algae. But something was wrong. Marcus frowned. There were recent tire tracks in the mud, different from his own. And when he looked more closely at the mess hall, he noticed the door was ajar, not broken down as it should have been after so many years of abandonment. Someone had been here, or still was. He got out of the pickup and Ghost jumped out after him, immediately starting to sniff the ground. Marcus walked slowly toward the cabins, his eyes scanning every detail. Near the central fire pit, there were ashes that looked recent, not from last week, but definitely not 15 years old. A few empty bean cans were stacked near a rock, and there were boot prints in the damp earth, small boot prints likely from someone not very large. Marcus felt his heart speed up. He had come here expecting to find a dead place, frozen in time, a place where he could make peace with his past in silence, but someone had turned Pine Ridge into something else, a refuge, a hideout. He approached cabin 3, the one that used to belong to the oldest scouts. The door was closed but not locked. He pushed it slowly, and it opened with a creak. Inside, the smell of mildew was strong, but there was something else. The scent of soap, of coffee, of recent human life. In the corner there was a relatively new camping mattress with a blue sleeping bag folded on top. A Coleman lantern hung from a nail on the wall, and on a wooden crate turned upside down, serving as a table, was an open spiral notebook. Marcus moved closer and looked at the pages. It was an observation journal. September 15th, found moose tracks near the North Stream. 3 individuals, likely a female with calves. September 22nd, heavy storm during the night. The roof of cabin 1 is leaking. Need to fix it before it gets worse. October 3rd, ghost bird spotted again. 3rd time this month. Are they returning to the region? The handwriting was small and neat. Feminine, Marcus thought. And whoever it was had been here for at least a month, maybe longer. Outside, Ghost started barking. It wasn't the warning bark for strangers, but the curious sound she made when she found something interesting. Marcus stepped out of the cabin and saw the animal standing at the edge of the woods, staring into the trees. "What is it, girl?" Marcus approached and saw the trail. It was one of the camp's old hiking trails, but someone had been through recently, cutting low-hanging branches and marking the path with small piles of stones. He decided not to follow it now. It was getting dark, and he didn't know these woods like he used to. He went back to the pickup, grabbed his own backpack and camping gear. If he was going to spend a few days here, he'd better get settled. He chose cabin 5, the most remote one, least likely to cause a confrontation if the mysterious occupant returned. He cleared a corner, rolled out his sleeping bag, and lit his portable stove to make coffee. Ghost lay down near the door, in a watch position. As the water heated, Marcus looked out the broken window at the camp. The memories came back in waves. He had worked here for 7 years, from 23 to 30. It had been the best time of his life, teaching boys how to build fires, identify plants, work as a team, watching them grow over the summer camps. It had been pure purpose, until that day in August, until Tyler Morrison. The 14-year-old boy who had gone out on a supervised hike and simply vanished. They searched for 6 days. Helicopters, search dogs, volunteers from 3 counties. They never found a body. They never found anything. And Marcus, as the scoutmaster in charge, carried the blame. The camp closed at the end of that season. The families sued the scout organization. Marcus wasn't found criminally negligent, but the stain was there. He never worked with kids again. He spent the last 15 years doing odd jobs, moving from town to town, living alone with Ghost as his only constant companion. He drank the bitter coffee straight from the metal mug, letting the heat burn his tongue. He had come here thinking he would find only ruins, thinking he could look at the place where everything had fallen apart and finally move on. But now there was someone else in this story, and he needed to find out who. Night fell completely. Marcus didn't light a campfire, not wanting to announce his presence. He ate a cold cereal bar and lay down in his sleeping bag, Ghost curled up beside him. The silence of the mountains was profound, broken only by the wind in the trees and the distant call of an owl. He was almost asleep when he heard it. Footsteps, light, careful, but definitely footsteps. Someone was moving outside. Ghost raised her head, but Marcus placed a hand on her neck, signaling silence. The footsteps approached cabin 3, stopped, then continued toward the mess hall. Marcus got up slowly, grabbed his flashlight but didn't turn it on. He moved to the window and peered out. In the dim moonlight, he saw a small silhouette enter the mess hall. Minutes later, a soft flashlight beam appeared inside. Whoever it was, they were doing something. Cooking, maybe. Marcus waited. About 20 minutes later, the light went out, and the silhouette emerged, carrying something. It passed by the cabins and disappeared down the trail that led to the lake. Marcus didn't try to follow. He had the confirmation he needed. Someone was definitely living here, and from the cautious behavior, it was someone who didn't want to be found. He returned to his sleeping bag but took hours to fall asleep. When he finally did, he dreamed of Tyler Morrison walking alone in the forest, deeper and deeper, farther and farther, until he disappeared completely into the mist. He woke with the first light, sweaty and restless. Ghost was already awake, sitting by the door. Marcus got up, splashed cold water on his face from his water bottle, and decided it was time to stop hiding. If he was going to stay here for a few days, he needed to establish the rules with whoever the other occupant was. He left the cabin and walked toward the mess hall. The door was closed. He knocked twice. Silence. "I know someone's in here," he said, his voice loud but calm. "I'm not the police. I'm not the government. I used to work at this place a long time ago. Just came to visit. But I think we need to talk." Nothing. Marcus waited another minute, then shrugged and walked to the central fire pit. He gathered dry wood, prepared a base with fine kindling, and lit a small fire. He set his metal kettle on the rocks and made real coffee, not the instant kind from last night. The rich aroma spread through the camp. It was an old camp trick. Fresh coffee in the morning always drew people out. He was on his second mug when he heard the footsteps. He didn't turn his head, just kept staring at the fire. The footsteps stopped about 10 feet away. "Got any more coffee?" a female voice asked. Young, tired. Marcus took an extra mug from his pack, filled it, and held it out without looking back. "There's sugar if you want it." He heard the footsteps approach. A small hand took the mug. Then the person moved to the other side of the fire pit, where he could see her. She was a young woman, probably in her early 20s. Dark brown hair pulled into a messy ponytail. A thin face with freckles and wary green eyes. She wore dirty jeans, a red flannel jacket over a gray t-shirt, and worn-out hiking boots. She held the mug with both hands and watched him over the rim, like an animal ready to bolt. "You said you used to work here," she said. It wasn't a question. "From 98 to 05. Scoutmaster. Marcus Reeves." He took a sip of coffee. "And you?" "Riley." She didn't offer a last name. "I found this place in July. It was abandoned. Still is, technically. Technically, you're trespassing on private property. So are you." She had a point. Marcus smiled slightly. "Fair enough. A draw then." Riley relaxed a fraction. She sat down on a log on the other side of the fire, but kept her distance. Ghost chose that moment to appear, trotting out of the cabin and walking over to Marcus. Riley immediately tensed. "Is he yours?" "She." Ghost. Half wolf, half husky. Found her as a pup 6 years ago. She doesn't bite, unless I tell her to. Marcus scratched behind Ghost's ears. "Relax. I have a knife," Riley said. her hand moving instinctively to her pocket. I know. Saw it yesterday when you were in the kitchen. I've got one too, and a gun in the pickup. But neither of us is going to use them, right? Because neither of us wants trouble. Am I right? Riley studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. How long are you planning to stay? A few days. A week maybe. Just, needed to see this place again. It's been a long time. He looked around. You've made some repairs. What I could. I'm no carpenter, but I learned a few things on YouTube before I came here. She took a sip of coffee, made a face, and added sugar. Better. Why here? Marcus asked. Riley stiffened again. Why not? Montana's a big state. Lots of abandoned places. This camp is relatively close to small towns. You could have picked something more isolated if you really wanted to disappear. You ask a lot of questions. Sorry. Old habit. Worked with teenagers for years. You learn to read between the lines. He tossed a twig into the fire. Look, I'm not going to report you. I'm not going to call anyone. But I'm staying for a few days. I can stay in cabin 5. You keep 3. We can share the kitchen. We don't have to be friends, but we can be coexistent. Riley considered this. And the wolf? Ghost stays with me, but she's trained. She won't bother you. Another long silence. Then Riley nodded. Okay, but some rules. Don't touch my stuff. Don't follow me when I go for walks. And don't ask questions about where I came from or why I'm here. Fair, Marcus said. They finished their coffee in silence. Riley stood up first, washed her mug at the hand pump well that still worked, and went back to her cabin without another word. Marcus stared into the fire, Ghost lying at his side. There was something about the girl he recognized. The way she moved, always aware of the exits. The way she spoke, saying the bare minimum. The way she frequently glanced over her shoulder, as if expecting someone to follow her. He'd seen it before. In some of the boys who had come to the camp over the years. Boys from troubled homes, from difficult situations. Boys who needed a safe place, even a temporary one. Riley was running from something, and Marcus knew it was none of his business. But some part of him, the part that had been a scoutmaster, that had dedicated years to helping kids, that part wanted to know if she was okay, if she was safe, if there was anything he could do. He shook his head. It wasn't his responsibility. He had come here to deal with his own demons, not to adopt someone else's. The next few days settled into a strange routine. Marcus would wake up early, make coffee at the fire pit. Riley would eventually emerge, grab a mug. They'd exchange a few words about the weather or a needed repair. Then they'd go their separate ways. Marcus spent the first day exploring the camp, confronting memories. Cabin 1, where Tyler had stayed. The West Trail, where the boy had disappeared. The lake, where they held canoe races. Every place was a stab of memory and guilt. On the second day, he decided to do something useful. The camp's old generator was still in the back shed. Marcus was good with mechanics, having worked in garages between jobs over the years. He cleaned the generator, changed the old oil, replaced a few parts he'd brought in the pickup on pure instinct. By late afternoon, he managed to get it running. The electricity came back on in the mess hall and 2 of the cabins. When Riley returned from one of her hikes and saw the lights on, she stopped and stared at Marcus with something that could have been gratitude or suspicion. Thanks, she said finally. It'll help when the real snow starts. When are you planning on leaving? He asked. Before the snow. She walked up the mess hall steps. But that's still a while away. On the 3rd day, Riley surprised him. She showed up in the morning with a cloth bag full of mushrooms. Found them near the North Stream. They're edible. Thought you might want some. To thank you for the generator. Marcus examined the mushrooms. They were chanterelles, perfectly identified. You know your mushrooms. YouTube, she said with a half smile. And a lot of trial and error. Haven't eaten any poisonous ones yet, so I guess I'm doing okay. They cooked the mushrooms together that night in the mess hall. Riley had rice and spices stashed away. Marcus contributed some canned sausage he'd brought. It wasn't a fancy meal, but it was warm and comforting. They ate in a comfortable silence, sitting on opposite sides of the old picnic table. Ghost lay at Marcus's feet, but for the first time, her eyes followed Riley with curiosity instead of wariness. She's accepting you, Marcus commented. That's rare. Ghost usually only likes me. Maybe she knows I'm not a threat. Or maybe she recognizes someone who's also a little lost. The words were out before Marcus could censor them. Riley tensed, and he immediately regretted it. Sorry, that was out of... Are you? Riley interrupted him. Lost? Marcus considered the question. Yeah, I think I have been for 15 years. They didn't speak more that night, but something had shifted. A small bridge had been built between them. On the fourth day, it rained torrentially. Marcus stayed in his cabin most of the day, reading an old paperback he'd found on a dusty shelf. But late in the afternoon, he heard a knock on his door. It was Riley, soaked. "My cabin roof started leaking. Badly. I can't stay in there." Marcus didn't hesitate. "Come to the kitchen. There's the old couch in there. It's not comfortable, but it's dry." They ran through the downpour to the mess hall. Riley took off her wet jacket and Marcus fired up the portable heater he'd brought. He made more coffee and they sat, listening to the rain hammer on the metal roof. "Thanks," Riley said after a while, "for not being weird about this. Everyone needs help sometimes," Marcus replied. "Doesn't make you weak. My mom used to say that asking for help was admitting failure." Riley stared into her mug. "That's strong people solve their own problems." Marcus recognized the tone. "And you believe that?" "For a long time, yeah." She was quiet for a moment. "I had a younger sister, Mia, 5 years younger than me. When things got bad at home, I always took care of her. Always. But in June," she stopped, biting her lip. Marcus didn't push. He just waited. "In June, I couldn't take it anymore. Our mom had a new boyfriend. He drank, got mean, and I realized if I stayed, I was going to snap. I was going to do something stupid. So I ran. I left Mia with our aunt, who lives 2 towns over. But still, I left." The guilt in her voice was palpable. Marcus knew that guilt intimately. "You did the best you could in that situation. Did I? Or did I just run because it was easier?" "Sometimes running is surviving," Marcus said softly. "I learned that the hard way." Riley looked up at him. "How?" And so, for the first time in 15 years, Marcus talked about Tyler Morrison, about the 14-year-old boy who had gone missing on a supervised hike, about the endless searches, the crushing guilt, the sleepless nights wondering if he had done something differently, about how it had destroyed his career, his identity, his sense of purpose. "They never found him," Marcus finished, his voice raw. "Not a body, not a clue, nothing, and I carried that. I carried the blame for every decision I made that day. Every minute I wasn't looking right at him, as if I could have stopped whatever happened." "You couldn't have," Riley said with certainty. "You know that, right?" "In theory, yes. In practice, hard to believe it." The rain continued all night. Riley slept on the couch in the mess hall. Marcus stayed in one of the chairs, refusing to leave her alone in the unfamiliar space. Ghost positioned herself between them, like a bridge. In the morning, the rain had passed. Riley had gone back to her cabin to assess the damage when a car appeared on the access road. Marcus, who was organizing firewood, felt his stomach tighten. It was a green Forest Service SUV. A ranger got out, a man in his 50s with a graying beard. "Morning," he called out. "Everything all right here?" Marcus forced himself to look casual. "Everything's great, just visiting an old haunt." "You have permission to be here?" "This is private property. I used to work here years ago, scoutmaster. Figured there'd be no harm in visiting." Marcus walked closer, keeping the ranger's focus on him and away from the cabins. "Just nostalgia." The ranger nodded, looking around. "Right. Well, for your information, this place has been sold. A timber company bought the land. They're going to start logging in about 6 months. Just doing rounds to make sure no one's causing trouble before then." Marcus felt a heavy weight in his chest. "Sold? For timber?" "Yes, sir. Good trees around here. Mature pine. Company paid a pretty penny." The ranger turned to get back in his car, then stopped. "Oh, and if you see any signs of people squatting around here, let me know. We've had some reports of folks using abandoned properties for shelter. It's technically trespassing." "Of course," Marcus lied. "I'll keep an eye out." The ranger drove away. Marcus stood there, listening to the sound of the engine fade. 6 months. Riley had 6 months until this place ceased to exist. He glanced over at cabin 3 and saw the curtain move. She had heard everything. That night, Riley didn't show up for coffee at the fire. Marcus waited until dark, then went to her cabin. He knocked softly. "Riley, can I come in?" Silence. Then, "It's open." She was sitting on the mattress, hugging her knees, staring at the wall. 6 months, she said without looking at him. "I know." Marcus sat on the floor near the door, giving her space. "But it's still 6 months. That's time for you to figure out the next step." "What next step?" "I have nowhere to go, Marcus. I have no money. I have no useful skills. I barely finished high school. This place was all I had." "That's not true. You have more than you think." "Like what?" "You know how to survive on your own. You can identify plants, fix things, make do with what you have. That's more than most people can do. Great. I can put that on my non-existent resume. Marcus understood the frustration. Look, I don't have magic answers, but I know you're not alone in this. If you want help figuring out what to do next, I can help. I still have a few contacts, people who work with kids in tough situations. Riley finally looked at him. Why do you care? You don't know me. Because someone should have cared about Tyler Morrison and no one did. Because someone should have cared about you before you needed to run and no one did. Because maybe, if I couldn't save one kid 15 years ago, I can at least try not to let a young woman fall through the cracks now. He rubbed his face. I know that's selfish, that maybe I'm doing this more for me than for you. But the offer is real. If you want help, I'll help. Riley looked at him for a long time. Then, for the first time since they'd met, she cried. Not a lot, just a few silent tears that she wiped away quickly. I don't know what to do, she admitted in a small voice. For the first time in my life, I really don't know. That's okay, Marcus said. We'll figure it out together. In the days that followed, something fundamentally shifted between them. It was no longer two strangers sharing a space. It was something closer to camaraderie, to trust. Marcus fixed the roof on Riley's cabin 3. She taught him the best trails for morning hikes. They cooked together every evening, cautiously sharing stories. Marcus talked about his childhood in Oregon, about finding his purpose in the Scouts after years of drifting. Riley talked about Seattle, about growing up with an addict mother and a stepfather who changed every couple of years, about how she had raised Mia as much as any mother, changing diapers at 12, helping with homework at 15. I never really had a childhood, Riley said one night as they washed dishes. I was always the adult in the room, and now you're getting a chance to just be, Marcus observed. Must be strange. It's terrifying, she admitted. I don't know who I am when I'm not taking care of someone or running from someone. Then now's your chance to find out. 1 week turned into 2. Marcus knew he should leave, get back on the road, find the next odd job in the next town. But something about this place, about this situation, held him. For the first time in years, he had a purpose again. Not a grand saving the world purpose, but something small and real, helping one person, just one, and maybe in the process, helping himself. It was Riley who brought up the topic they were both avoiding. It was late afternoon, and they were sitting on the deck by the lake, watching the last rays of sun filter through the trees. Ghost was asleep between them. The ranger said the logging company is coming in 6 months, Riley said. But probably before the heavy winter sets in, right? So more like 4 months. Realistically. Probably, Marcus agreed. I need to figure out a plan before then. Yeah. You said you had contacts, people who help young people. Marcus nodded. There's a program in Missoula, a transitional home for young adults, 18 to 25. They help with education, job training, temporary housing. I knew the director years ago. Good guy. Sounds too good to be true. It's not perfect. There are rules, structure. You'd have to really commit. But it would be a start. Riley was silent for a long time. What about Mia? Your sister? Yeah, I just left her. I haven't talked to her since June. She must hate me. Or she's worried about you. Marcus looked at Riley. You said you left her with your aunt. That's better than leaving her with your mother, right? Yeah. Our Aunt Linda is good. But still, Mia is 14. That's a crucial age. She needs someone. She needs a sister who is healthy and whole, not a sister who is breaking herself trying to hold everything together, Marcus said gently. Sometimes, stepping away to heal is the most responsible thing you can do. Do you believe that? About you and Tyler? Marcus took a moment to answer. I'm learning to. It's hard, but I'm learning. That night, Marcus made a call he had avoided for years. He called the regional scout office, asked to speak to someone who had worked there during his time. He was transferred 3 times before he found Karen Mitchell, who had been an administrative coordinator. Marcus Reeves? I don't believe it, she said when he identified himself. How long has it been? 15 years? About that, Marcus replied, his voice tight. Karen, I need to ask you something. About Tyler Morrison. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Marcus, you know we can't discuss specific cases. I just need to know if they ever found anything. Anything at all. I know I stopped following up after I left, but I need to know. Karen sighed. Marcus, you didn't hear? Hear what? Tyler was found, alive, 2 years after he went missing. Marcus felt the world stop. What? He had run away from home, Marcus. It had nothing to do with the camp or with you. He'd planned the whole thing. The kid was dealing with some heavy stuff at home, abuse that no one knew about. He used the hike as an opportunity to disappear. He was found living with an older cousin in Idaho. He was fine. Marcus had to sit down. His legs simply gave out. He was alive? Yes. And when the authorities talked to him, he made it very clear that nothing that happened was anyone at the camp's fault. He'd been planning to run for months. It was just circumstance that it happened during the hike. Why did no one tell me? We tried to find you, Marcus, but you had moved, changed your number. We eventually stopped looking. I'm sorry. We assumed you had moved on. Moved on. Marcus almost laughed. He had spent 15 years carrying guilt for something that wasn't even his fault to begin with. 15 years broken by a tragedy that was never a tragedy. Is he okay now? Marcus asked, his voice hoarse. Last I heard, yes. Finished high school, was heading to college. He turned out okay, Marcus. And you should have been okay too. After he hung up, Marcus sat in the darkness of the cabin for a long time. Ghost came and rested her head on his lap, sensing the emotional turmoil. He had carried this guilt for so long that it had become part of his identity. Without it, who was he? The answer came slowly, but it came. He was someone who cared, someone who had dedicated years to helping young people, someone who, even when broken, still wanted to make a difference. He hadn't failed Tyler. The boy had chosen his own path, for reasons Marcus could never have known or prevented. And maybe, just maybe, he could make a difference for Riley, not by saving her because she didn't need saving, but by helping her find her own path. The next morning, he told Riley everything. They were sitting on the lake deck again, the place that had become theirs for important conversations. So, you carried that guilt for 15 years, Riley said slowly, for something that was never your fault, basically. And now I have to figure out who I am without it, Marcus admitted. It's scary. That guilt was familiar, comfortable in a twisted way. Without it, I feel a little lost. Riley looked at him with understanding. I get that. Taking care of Mia, even when it was exhausting and unfair, it gave me a purpose. Now that I'm not, I feel empty. So maybe we both need to figure out who we are when we're not carrying things that don't belong to us, Marcus suggested. How do we do that? Honestly, I have no idea. But I think it starts with small steps. For me, maybe it's time to move back to Montana for good. Find real work, not just odd jobs. Build something. And for me? I think for you, it starts with calling Mia. Riley tensed immediately. I can't. Why not? Because what if she hates me? What if she blames me for abandoning her? What if she's just worried and relieved to know you're alive? Marcus said gently. Riley, you don't have to go back yet. You don't have to solve everything at once. But at least let her know you're okay, that you haven't forgotten her. Riley bit her lip, her eyes shining. I don't know what I'd say to her. How about the truth? That you needed to get out, that you love her, that you're working on getting better so you can be the sister she deserves. It took 3 days for Riley to work up the courage. Marcus lent her his phone and walked away to give her privacy. He stayed on the other side of the camp, tinkering with needless repairs, trying not to think about what was happening. When Riley finally found him, she had been crying, but her face was lighter than he had ever seen it. How did it go? He asked. Hard. Really hard, Riley admitted. She was upset. She was angry. But also, she understood, more than I expected. And your aunt? Aunt Linda is taking good care of her. Mia said it's better than anywhere she's ever lived. She's in a good school. She has friends. She's... Okay. Riley wiped her eyes. I spent 4 months torturing myself, thinking I had destroyed her. But she's okay. And now? Now I need to make sure I get okay too, Riley said with determination. For me. And so that, eventually, I can be part of her life again. The right way. Marcus smiled. That sounds like a good plan. Tell me more about that program in Missoula. They spent the evening planning. Marcus called his old contact at the transitional program. There was space available. Riley would need to fill out paperwork, go through an interview, but they could take her in a few weeks. But, Riley said as they looked at a map of Montana spread on the kitchen table, I want to come back here, when I get settled, one last time before they tear it down. Would that be okay? More than okay, Marcus said. I'll come with you. 3 weeks later, Marcus drove Riley to Missoula. The drive took 4 hours. Riley was nervous, her hands twisted in her lap for most of the trip. Ghost in the back would occasionally nudge her shoulder with her snout in comfort. The transitional home was a refurbished Victorian building in a quiet neighborhood. When Marcus pulled up in front, Riley didn't move right away. "What if I can't do it?" she whispered. "What if I mess it all up? Then you try again," Marcus said simply. "But you won't. You survived on your own in the mountains for 4 months, Riley. You can do this." She nodded, took a deep breath, and got out of the car. Marcus carried her backpack, the only luggage she had. They met Sarah Chen, the program director. She was an Asian-American woman in her 40s with a warm smile and eyes that had seen many difficult stories. "Riley," she said, extending a hand, "Marcus told me about you. Welcome." The interview took an hour. Marcus waited outside, pacing the sidewalk, Ghost watching him with concerned eyes. When Riley finally came out, she was smiling shyly. "I got in. I can move in tomorrow." Marcus felt a tight knot in his chest release. "That's great. They're going to help me get a GED first, then vocational training. There are counseling programs. And Sarah said we can work toward me eventually having visits with Mia, when I'm ready." "Sounds perfect." Riley looked at him and suddenly wrapped her arms around him in a tight hug. "Thank you for everything, for not turning me in, for helping me, for caring." Marcus returned the hug, surprised by the emotion he felt. "You did the hard work. I just pointed you in a few directions." "Still." She pulled away, wiping her eyes. "Are you staying in Montana?" "I think so. Maybe it's time to stop running." They had dinner together that night, at a small diner Sarah recommended. They talked about plans, about futures, about possibilities, things neither of them had allowed themselves to think about for a long time. When Marcus dropped her off at the transitional home the next morning, Riley paused at the door. "Pine Ridge," she said. "In a few months, when I'm settled. We go back?" "Definitely," Marcus promised. "I'll send you my new number as soon as I get a landline." He drove back to Pine Ridge alone, Ghost in the passenger seat this time. The camp felt different now, less haunted, more peaceful. Marcus spent the next few days cleaning, organizing, making final repairs he hadn't gotten to before. Not because the place needed it, but because it felt right, a way of saying goodbye. He also started making calls, to old contacts, to local businesses, to possibilities. And when a mechanic shop in Kalispell, 2 hours from Pine Ridge, offered him a steady job, he took it. For the first time in 15 years, Marcus Reeves signed a lease. He rented a small house with a yard for Ghost, 40 minutes from the shop. He bought used furniture. He hung pictures on the walls. He built a life. He kept in touch with Riley through emails at a public library. Since she didn't have her own phone yet, she was making good progress. She'd passed her GED. She was taking a course to become an IT technician. She had even started having supervised visits with Mia on Saturdays. "It's weird," she wrote in one email. "For the first time, I'm not responsible for taking care of her. I can just be her big sister, laugh with her, hear about school, about boys, about normal teenage stuff. It's liberating." Marcus smiled as he read it. He understood. 4 months after Riley entered the program, they finally made the plan. It was early March, before the timber company started work, but after the worst of the winter had passed. Marcus drove to Missoula and picked Riley up. She looked different, healthier, with more color in her cheeks. Her hair was cut in a new style. She wore clothes that actually fit, not thrift store cast-offs. But more than that, she seemed lighter, less haunted. "Ready for this?" he asked as they drove down the familiar roads. "Ready," she confirmed. Pine Ridge was exactly as they had left it, just a little more covered in snow. They walked through the camp together, Ghost exploring excitedly. "It's strange," Riley said, standing in the middle of the clearing. "This place saved me. It gave me time to breathe, to think. But now, looking back, I see how I was just hiding. Hiding has its place," Marcus said. "Sometimes you need to hide to heal. And you? Have you healed?" Marcus looked around the camp, at the cabins where he had worked, at the trail where Tyler had disappeared, at the fire pit where he and Riley had built an unlikely friendship. "I'm getting there," he admitted. "I still have bad days, but I have good days now, too. That's progress." They spent the whole day there. They built one last fire. They cooked one last meal in the mess hall. They walked the trails Riley had mapped out. In the afternoon, as the sun began to set, they sat on the lake deck one last time. "What do you think will happen to this place?" Riley asked. "They'll cut down the trees, build logging roads. In a few years, there won't be anything recognizable left. Does that make you sad?" Marcus thought about it. "It used to, but now I think it's okay. Places aren't just the buildings or the trees. They're the memories, the experiences, what they teach us. And we take those things with us. Deep, Riley teased. Must have learned it from someone wise. They laughed. It was easy, comfortable. As it started to get dark, Marcus had an idea. "Wait here," he said, and jogged to the pickup. He came back with a small metal box he had brought especially for this. Inside were two things: an old photo of the camp in its glory days that he had found in his belongings, and a note Riley had written weeks ago, when he'd asked her to write something to her future self. They dug a shallow hole near the central fire pit and buried the box. "Time capsule," Marcus said. "Even if they tear down the trees, this stays. A small mark of our own." "For who?" Riley asked. "For us. To remind us that we were here, that it mattered, that this meant something." They drove back to Missoula in comfortable silence. When Marcus dropped Riley off at the transitional home, she turned before getting out of the car. "I'll see you again, right? This isn't goodbye." "Definitely not goodbye," Marcus assured her. "You have my number now, and when you're ready, come visit. I'll introduce you to Ghost properly, in a non-abandoned camp setting." Riley smiled. "I'd like that." But she didn't get out yet. "Marcus, thank you for letting me have my own journey, for not trying to fix me or save me, just for being there. Thank you for reminding me that I can still make a difference," Marcus replied, "even when I thought I couldn't." 3 months later, Marcus got a phone call. It was Riley. "Are you busy this weekend?" she asked. "Why?" "Sarah thought it would be good if I took on a project, something that combines my new skills with something meaningful. And I had an idea." "What is it?" "You know that land where Pine Ridge used to be?" "Yeah. I called the timber company. They've already finished the harvest. The land is being sold again. And I was thinking," Riley took a deep breath, "what if we tried to buy it? Not all of it, just a few acres. Enough to rebuild. Not as a scout camp, but as, I don't know, a transition center. A place where kids like me can have space to breathe, learn skills, figure out their next steps." Marcus was silent for so long that Riley asked if he was still there. "I'm here," he said finally. "Just processing." "That would be incredible, Riley. But it would also be expensive, complicated." "I know. But Sarah said there are grants, community funds, and you know people from the Scout organization. Maybe they'd help. It's a long shot, but it's worth a shot," Marcus finished. "Yes, it's absolutely worth a shot." It took 6 months of planning, paperwork, community meetings, and fundraising drives. But slowly, the project took shape. The Scout organization contributed, feeling guilty about how they had treated Marcus. Sarah and the transitional program offered structural support. The local community, touched by the story, made donations. And on a crisp October morning, exactly 1 year after Marcus had first returned to Pine Ridge, they signed the papers. 5 acres, including the site where the original camp stood, now belonged to a new nonprofit, the Pine Ridge Transition Center. Marcus would be the director of operations. Riley, after completing her program, would be the youth coordinator. They would have to rebuild almost everything. The work would take months, maybe years. But for the first time, they both had something they hadn't had in a very long time. Purpose, community, hope. At the small, informal, groundbreaking ceremony, only a handful of people were there. Sarah and some of the kids from the transitional program, Karen from the Scout organization, Riley's aunt with Mia, who was now 15 and excited about the idea of volunteering, and Ghost, of course, exploring the familiar terrain with renewed excitement. Marcus was about to make a speech when Riley stopped him. "Wait," she said, and walked over to where they had buried the time capsule. "Let's open it." "Already? Shouldn't we wait like 10 years? "Why? It already feels like a lifetime ago." She dug it up and pulled out the metal box. Inside, the old photo of the camp looked almost ironic now, considering what they were about to build. But it was Riley's note that Marcus read aloud, with her permission. "To my future self, I hope you found what you were looking for. I hope you know now that running away is sometimes necessary, but staying can be too. I hope you've learned that asking for help isn't weakness. And I hope you remember that it was in an abandoned camp, with a broken man and his wolf, that you started to learn how to rebuild yourself. Don't forget that. Don't forget that you are stronger than you think." When Marcus finished reading, there were tears in several eyes. He looked at Riley, who was holding Mia's hand. "I think your future self got the message," he said softly. Riley smiled. "I think so." Marcus turned to the small group gathered. This place, he began, was where I lost myself, where I carried guilt that wasn't mine, where I thought my life had ended. He glanced at Riley. But it was also where I learned that endings can be beginnings, that sometimes the people we most need to meet show up in the most unlikely places, that healing isn't linear or clean, but it is possible. Pine Ridge is no longer a scout camp, he continued, and it shouldn't be. It's something new now, a place for young people who need space to breathe, to think, to figure out who they are without all the noise of the world, a place where being lost is okay, because that's where you start from. And for any young person who comes here in the future, Marcus looked directly at Mia, who might be one of the first, know that you are not alone, that broken adults can still help, that wolves can be family, that abandoned camps can be new beginnings. He held up a shovel. Let's build something. And they did. Not that day, but day by day, week by week. Marcus and Riley worked side by side, along with volunteers, kids from the program, community members. Cabins were rebuilt, not like the old ones, but better, adapted for accessibility, with proper insulation, with spaces for counseling and learning. The mess hall became a culinary training center. The old shed became a workshop for carpentry and mechanics. The trails were remapped, this time with educational stations about nature, survival, but also about mental health and self-care. 6 months after the groundbreaking, the first group of kids arrived. 5 teenagers between 16 and 18, all from difficult situations, all needing space to figure out their next steps. Marcus greeted them at the entrance, Ghost at his side. "Welcome to Pine Ridge," he said. "This isn't a summer camp. It's not group therapy, though we have counselors available. And it's definitely not jail or punishment. It's just a place. A place where you can be who you need to be while you figure out who you want to become." One of the boys, thin and wary, looked around. "What if we don't figure it out?" Riley, standing next to Marcus, answered. "Then you get more time. Figuring yourself out doesn't have a deadline." That first night, around the central fire pit, Marcus looked at the young faces lit by the flames. He saw fear, distrust, cautious hope. He saw Tyler Morrison, though the boy wasn't there. He saw the Riley from 6 months ago. He saw himself from 15 years ago. "Does anyone want to start?" Riley asked gently. "It doesn't have to be your life story, just something, anything." Silence for a long moment. Then the youngest girl, no more than 16, spoke up. "My name's Jen, and I don't know what I'm doing here, but I didn't know where else to go." "That's a perfect start," Marcus said. "Welcome, Jen." One by one the others began to speak. Small revelations, nothing deep yet, but it was a beginning. And beginnings, Marcus had learned, were everything. That night, after the kids had gone to their cabins, Marcus and Riley stayed by the fire. "I think we did it," Riley said softly. "I think so." Marcus tossed another log on the fire. "You never told me. Why did you really come back here that day, a year ago?" Riley considered the question. "Honestly, I don't know. Maybe I just needed to know there was one place in the world where I could exist without explanation, without judgment. It turned out to be this place. And now it's where I help other people find that too." She looked at him. "What about you? Why did you really come back?" Marcus thought of Tyler Morrison, found alive in Idaho. He thought of 15 years of needless guilt. He thought of Ghost, of Riley, of all the winding paths that had led him back to this place. "I think I needed to learn that redemption isn't about undoing the past," he said finally. "It's about creating a better future in spite of it, or maybe because of it." "That's deep." "I learned from someone wise." They smiled at each other in the firelight. Ghost slept between them, snoring softly. The mountains rose dark all around, silhouettes against a sky full of stars. And somewhere in those mountains, in a small valley that had been abandoned and was now alive again, 5 young people slept in warm cabins, each carrying their own stories, their own fears, their own hopes. Each of them not yet knowing that, just like Marcus and Riley, they too were at the start of something. Not a simple, tidy, happy ending, but something better, something real, a new beginning. Marcus looked into the fire, remembering the first night he'd returned to Pine Ridge, driving alone for hours, carrying guilt he didn't need to. If he could talk to that man now, what would he say? Maybe something simple. Keep driving. The road is longer than you think, but it's worth it. And when you get to the place you think is the end, look again. It might just be the beginning. The fire crackled. The stars wheeled slowly overhead. And in the stillness of the Montana mountains, at a place called Pine Ridge, broken lives were slowly starting to piece themselves back together. Not perfectly, not without scars, but back together all the same. And in the end, that was all that mattered.